get my screen sharing going. All right. And hopefully you can confirm that I am sharing my slide deck and everybody can see it.
Yes, we can see.
Fantastic. First off, I'm Clayton Barlow. I'm a senior Azure specialist. I just moved to this role. I was a cloud solution architect, and I focused really heavily in the security and the secure research aspects of Azure, and have played around with a lot of the security controls and security features of Azure. So that's where I kind of come from, and that's where I'm thinking. Also, my experience lends me to the higher ed space in the fact that I was the enterprise architect for the University of Utah and University of Utah Health Systems for about 6.5 years. So even more sensitive to the space of higher ed and the challenges we have. So with that, I'm going to kind of rip through some things, and I'm going to hopefully have plenty of time to get in and do a little bit of demo and just kind of poke around the Defender for IoT, and we'll kind of look at the 3 different methodologies for Defender for IoT, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get into it. So I just want to kind of level set right out of the gate where Microsoft is as a security player, right? I mean, everybody knows Microsoft and what we do, and we know we've got the Defender for endpoint and all these other pieces. But when we really look at Microsoft as a holistic security player, that's one of the things you have to think about, from identity all the way to IoT. So, you know, your core services all the way to the edge. We've got massive investments, and we lead in 5 Gartner Magic Quadrants now. And so it's just one of those things, when you think security, I really want you to think Microsoft. I am going to show some kind of pieces where we integrate with other aspects of the Microsoft ecosystem, and we're going to talk a lot about that kind of holistic approach as we go through. But just want to kind of level set. If you think of Microsoft, think of security. It's a big deal. The other thing that I always talk about with when we talk about security at Microsoft, a lot of our tools, you know, we bring our experience to the customer. And why is that important? Well, if you can think of another entity that gets attacked more than Microsoft and is willing to share all the telemetry and data that we learn, you'd be pretty hard pressed. And so, you know, when you think of signal diversity, the things that we can do to kind of come up with threat intelligence and just understand what we're seeing in the wild and bring that back to our customers, there's a huge value piece to that by itself. And we're growing in this area as fast as possible. So again, just level set with Microsoft as a security thought partner on that regard. So one of the things that I see, especially in higher ed, is the amount of signals coming through, the amount of traffic, the amount of everything. And IoT is just making it crazier, right? So when you think about the fact that, let's say 75% of enterprise customers have over 5,000 IoT devices in their environment, that's very similar to a lot of our education customers. When you think about all the different pieces that they might have, from HVAC systems, water monitoring systems, any of that kind of stuff, those are 5,000 additional endpoints that need to be monitored, right? And it's kind of crazy when you think about it in that regards of just the amount of signals we're now generating, right? And so you just kind of think about that piece a little bit. And so as we set the why of why IoT and Defender for IoT is so important, it's just, you know, framing these concepts. And then you think about some of the real world IoT examples that we've recently had, right? You know, NASA getting hacked because of a Raspberry Pi device, or the pipeline attacks, right? These are things that the bad guys are genuinely looking at as kind of low-hanging fruit, right? They look at how these things are not managed the way that other devices are managed, so that gives them opportunity. So how do we try and shut down that opportunity, right? And when we talk to CIOs and CISOs, there's this gap between the adoption and the risk. and the mitigation aspects, right? So these are just kind of some interesting numbers to look at. When you look at the adoption, 68% are saying IoT or operational technologies are critical to supporting their innovation goals or strategic goals, but 71% don't even know with full confidence the inventory of their devices. So I mean that by itself is pretty crazy. And again, just to keep the acronyms out there, IoT, OT, IoT, Internet of Things, OT is operational technologies or things. I mean, OT stands for operational technologies. So it could be an IoT device, but something along those lines. But anyways, we're going to keep rolling through the slide deck. This will be available to you when we're done. So you'll be able to look at these things, go to the links that are put on there and kind of go from there. So some of the challenges we have with the existing solutions when it comes to how we're dealing with, endpoint protection or all these different pieces. We got agents, firewalls, network access control, vuln scanners, all these kind of stuff. A lot of times they're just not designed for IoT, right? So if you think about a NAC, they're first of all, they're a pain in the butt to deploy and maintain sometimes. A lot of times they don't really see a lot of the things that we're after, or like anomaly detection within behavioral anomaly detection is the best way to put it. And then a firewall, right? They're designed to protect the perimeter. It's very port and signature based. It's not really got a lot of context of what's malicious versus normal. And again, no real behavior anomaly detection. So agents we love, right? Agents are fantastic, but they don't really give the full picture anyway. And not everything can have an agent on it. So we're going to talk about these different pieces on how Defender for IoT can work without using an agent and give us some more insight. And that's really important because for an embedded device, there's probably not an agent you can put on there, right? And again, the agents are very aware of what's going on in their own system, but they don't have that kind of understanding of network segmentation or anything of that nature. And then scanners, again, no behavior anomaly detection and very limited understanding of IoT in general. So in comes Microsoft Defender for IoT, right? And if we think about the architectural principles that we're looking at is, it's got to be somewhat unified. It's got to be across the enterprise, and it's got to be always monitoring and always learning and always evolving, right? But with corporate, it's a little easier because we've got that easy deployment and maintenance, and we can still use an agentless solution for those enterprise IoT devices. But we also have some integrated approaches that we can talk about a little bit more. So kind of from the high level perspective, this is kind of how we think about it, right? We've got our different sources. So whether that's a sensor, whether that's a Defender for endpoint, and I'm going to talk about how we deal with some of these different pieces, how we put them all together, and then the different engines we can use, and the different integrations and capabilities that we can pull together, right? So this is kind of the high level architecture of what we're thinking through, right? So if we get first into those, just the data sources. Well, again, I've talked about kind of different places that we can play in these data sources. And I'm going to hopefully have plenty enough time to jump in and show some of this off, right, when we go into that main Defender for IoT. So if we think about the corporate IT environment, right, your phones, your PCs, your scanners, your printers, all that kind of stuff. Well, some of those are still smart devices that we can bring in, right? But then there's also the fact that we can start looking at some of these IoT networks and use, span port or traffic analysis and bring those in. And then on the far spectrum, you've got the OT environment, right? So again, that operational technology. And we can bring them all in as well as third-party sources to bring into Defender for IoT. So this gives us a broad coverage spectrum from all the different data sources, right? We can have passive, agentless, and stand it up a little bit easier. And we're going to talk again. I'm going to show these different pieces in action in the portal to see how you configure each one of these. And so then we think about the engines, right? And this is where it gets really important as to how we put these pieces together, from insights, from behavioral analytics and machine learning. All of these things come together to make a substantially more robust solution, right? So if we think about just machine learning, what it can do and bring in, it really can help do that discovery of the topology. So you can start creating a network map, which gives you that kind of view into where all these things live and how they're interconnected, as well as it can help develop a behavioral model, right? So it's going to see all these things and it's going to be able to say, hey, what's normal, what's not normal? And those are the kind of big pieces that can put into a solid risk assessment and give you a little bit more insight and make more sense of the signals that are being created. And if we think about the capabilities, well, what is it? What can we do? By bringing this data in, running it through our different engines, now what can we do with it, right? Well, immediately I'm going to be able to get into a little bit more robust asset inventory and vulnerability management, but also we're going to have those alerts and incidents that we can pay attention to, and we can start getting into the response aspect of things. And again, I'll kind of show this in real time in the portal, right? So this is where stuff gets really interesting as well, is not with just in Defender for IoT, but how I can do a little bit more from the advanced inventory management from using your current Defender. So Microsoft 365 Defender, right? Stuff that you've already got. From Vuln Manage, to be able to kind of discover and prioritize and identify vulnerabilities, as well as misconfigurations all across the network. And this is a big concern when you think that, over 80% of devices they're connected to the internet. And about, over half have old versions of Windows without regular patching. So when you think about that attack vector of being able to take control over an IoT device and then traverse the network and get into an older unpatched version of Windows, right? Now all of a sudden you've got a real serious threat. So when you think about being able to look at your IoT devices and these different devices and get into the device and just in your Microsoft 365 Defender portals and being able to go through it, it gives you again that transparency across teams, that transparency across technology solutions, and give you the ability to just have a better understanding of your overall posture, right? And especially when it comes to vulnerability management, to understand some of these other pieces that you can go look at. Of course, having the incidents also baked in give you a lot of information in the fact that you're able to see in real time what's going on in your event, in your organization, by including your IT and your IoT devices into a single dashboard, right? So I make the joke all the time, if you're in security, sometimes it's not so much the single pane of glass, but it's the single glass of pain, right? Being able to see all of this in one place is remarkably helpful, especially just as humans, where we've got to be able to get that kind of instant correlation of what's going on and getting an understanding of what's going on in my environment from an attack perspective. So, and then of course, when we think about the biggest differentiators about Defender for IoT is this kind of thing I already said, right? We've got a massive expertise in IoT and OT that we're processing, as it says here, 24 trillion signals. We're constantly understanding what's going on in the market. And that's what we bring to our customers to be able to say, hey, what do we have? What do we have as far as insight that we can share with you and make you more secure without having to process 24 trillion signals and learn from everything that we've learned from. And then when we get into the integrations, which I've already kind of talked about a few of them, right, within the Defender 365 space, or the Microsoft Defender for endpoint space, but also SIEM and SOAR and other aspects like ticketing or CMDB and all the other pieces that we can bring to the table, right? So naturally, as you would not be surprised, we're going to have a lot around Sentinel, right? We're going to have this natural integration with Sentinel. And I don't know how much you've all seen from Azure Sentinel, but this is a screenshot of our graphical investigation, right? So if you see, we've got these different workstations, we've got PLC programming, and then we've got this device that's over on the side. We can kind of see what's going on by using these pieces, where obviously you can parse all this data out into a third-party scene as well. You just get a lot of rich integration and easy integration into Sentinel when you're using Defender for IoT. And thing that you should be aware of is your Defender products, all of your Defender products come into Azure Sentinel for free. It's not something you pay for because you're already collecting it. You've already covered your IoT devices through Defender for IoT. You don't have that same challenge of now I have to pay for a second piece of ingestion, or I have to license this additional capacity in my SIEM. We cover that as part of the whole piece, and I'm going to show you a little bit how to click those on and kind of go through it. So, and again, just kind of a reiteration of why Microsoft. We've got a unified solution. We've got a lot of options, and we're going to kind of talk on these options real quick, right, about each one. And so what I'm going to do is I am going to share a different screen, and let's make sure that all comes over. Hopefully, that was kind of an interesting way to share there. Can everybody see the my browser screen with the Defender for IoT? Okay, awesome. The first thing I'm actually going to do is I'm going to jump out of the Defender for IoT, and I'm just going to jump into Defender for Cloud just to understand the suite of services that we have from the Defender for Cloud perspective, right? Because this is essentially a subset of it. But if you haven't had a chance to look at Microsoft Defender for Cloud, this is a security posture management tool specifically for cloud resources. Now, we're going to get into the subset of Defender IoT, but again, I want to talk about this kind of exhaustive and complete solution that we have to monitor your security posture for not just Azure, but as you can see, I've got AWS accounts in here. I've got GCP projects. I've got a lot of things that I can look at here, right? As well as our firewall manager internally. I can look at regulatory compliance. I can look at all these different pieces that I have. And so if I look at my workload protections, right, within Defender for Cloud, you're going to get a lot of things like recommendations to improve your secure score and kind of review all this. Now, I'm in my demo environment, so I'm not trying to make this perfect. I'm trying to make a little bit of noise here so that I can get some actionable and ideas out of it, right? So from securing management ports, and if you see this little lightning bolt, that means I can do that remediation right from here. I can actually kick this off, and this is looking at my EC2 instances, and I'd click on one of these and I'd hit fix, and we'd be off to the races. So there's a lot of different functionalities in Defender for Cloud, but again, this is a Defender for IoT, so I don't want to get too deep in here, but I just want you to be aware, kind of from a baseline, from an understanding perspective, where you start with things, right? So if we come down here to workload protections, now I'm going to tell you right now, there's like 5 different ways into every piece of Azure. So I can click here and we can go a bunch of different ways. So I'm gonna click in, and you'll probably see me click a different way to get into these things, and it's going to be somewhat confusing because you're going to think, well, where did he click this time? A lot of times it's the same thing. It's just different options. Okay. So if I come down to here to workload protections, you can kind of see all these different things that I've got protected. Well, let's go into IoT security, and you're going to see this bring up as a subset Defender for IoT. When you come in here, you're immediately going to see a handful of different pieces, right? So you're going to see my operational networks, so operational technologies, so my OT of the IoT, right? And then my enterprise IoT networks and these devices. So we've got 2 different options, right? I can come in here and I'm going to set up OIT or IoT or OT security. And what it's going to want me to do is set up a sensor. So these sensors are pieces that I can put in to my on-prem network, because if I want to manage my on-prem network, and maybe I'm not using IoT Hub for my IoT pieces, and we're gonna talk about that a little bit too. We would put a sensor on-prem. Now, if I haven't done one already, this is going to ask me to do that first. Now, you've got two options with sensors. I can actually buy a pre-configured hardware device and throw that right on my network, and then start to connect my devices in through there. I can also run it as a VM, or I can download an ISO image and install it on an actual physical piece. So you've got a lot of options to create your sensor. And think of your sensor as your kind of collection point, right? And that's where it's going to pick up a lot of this piece. And so I already told you we can run this off of a spam port and use agentless. And so this is then the next thing I'd do. And then once I had all that going, I would go ahead and kick off my sensor name, and I would bring this up into Azure. And we'll look at some of these that are already configured. So we're going to come back to here. You can see I've got the same option here, configure, and it's going to tell me what I want to do. It's going to want to do my VM or physical appliance, then create my connection. And then again, I'm going to go with the span port. I'm going to connect that into my Defender for IoT solution out here. So sensors, those are my appliances that collect the information from the pieces, right? And so within my spots, I can create sites. And within those sites, that's where I'd have a sensor, right? So right now I've got 4 in here or 3 in here, and I can come look at one of these sensors real quickly, and we'll go in and take a peek at it. It's going to give me some basic information. I can go into my sensor settings, right? And we'll get a little bit deeper into this one as well. And I can always push my threat intelligence update. So if I have new definitions, I can push that down to my sensor from here, and that will take care of all the threat intelligence pieces I need for my sensors. So come back in here, sites and sensors. We've got some additional ones here. This is an enterprise IoT sensor. If I want to go look at the settings, and I don't have a bunch in here, but we're going to go ahead and hit. So we're going to choose a setting. I've got a bandwidth cap, subnets, VLAN naming that I can come in and I can make these changes. And so we'll go bandwidth cap, and we'll just say test. And I'm just giving you a quick run through all this stuff. This is not a training. This is definitely an overview, so you're just comfortable with it, right? Then I can set my bandwidth cap for IoT devices, and if it exceeds it, it's going to go ahead and kick things off. So it's just pretty straightforward. It's super easy management for a lot of this stuff. So this also gives me an idea of my sensors, right? And regular sensors and my enterprise IoT, right? You can see I've got different pieces here, and these are things that I need to look at from that perspective, right? And that's how I would kind of work through these. Now, if I wanted to onboard a new sensor or a new IoT sensor, again, we just saw this, right? This is how I can click in multiple different ways. So it starts coming together for what these different pieces are and where I can configure them for each piece, okay? So if we go to getting started, we saw those same pieces. So we're going to go into the device inventory now. This is a one-stop shop of where I can kind of look at my IoT devices. I've got 1,500 devices roughly. 14 of them are important and 3 are new. And I can also look at them by endpoint, by IoT, by OT, or by network. And then if I come down here, I can kind of see these classes and subtypes, types and subtypes in here, right? So if we look through at each one of these, we can see it's a workstation. So this is going to be on my enterprise devices. But if we keep looking through here, you're going to see, oh, now this is an industrial piece, right? This is a piece from Schneider Electric. So I can get a little bit more information about this, and I can even click in and let's take a look at the full details. So you can understand I'm getting a real quick view of the device itself. Now I'm getting in there. I'm able to take a peek at it, look through these things, and kind of look at different activities, different things I'm seeing, my risk scores, all of these different pieces, right? So this is a one-stop shop for a lot of your different devices. And you'll see we've got, a printer, we've got a miscellaneous embedded device, And all of these, you can come in and get a little bit more information on it. So again, when you think about an inventory perspective and just understanding your topology, this is where you'd come. So then the other thing that we'd want to pay attention to is alerts. What's going on, right? What's happening in my world here? So now I can come in and I can start looking for different alerts. This is all on the MITRE ATT&CK framework. So if you look at all these different pieces, you can see what's going on as a tactic perspective of what's going on. So, whether it's a port scan, unauthorized internet connectivity, you've got all these different pieces that you can come at, and you can start to investigate right from here, right? So we can come take a look at this one. We can see it's got 2 different tactics in use. We can see it's a high severity, it's a new one. Of course, we can always change it to active or closed. We can see the detection time. And if we want to view full details, we can come in and get a little bit more detail in there. So we can kind of see what's going on, the source and destination, the protocol that's being used, and get a little bit more, dig into it a little bit more. And it will even give us some action that we can take to mitigate this threat. Okay. So again, just kind of giving a quick capability overview of a lot of this stuff. So within recommendations, this is going to give you some basic ideas of how you can more effectively secure your environment. Right now, it's not got a lot going on here. I've made too many changes, and so it's not showing a lot of recommendations. But if you had vulnerabilities, if you had other aspects where you could improve your overall posture, this is where it would be, right? And then you've also got workbooks. And these are your kind of best way you can think about it is a dashboard, right? So if we want to look at sensor health, devices, or alerts, you could make this even more your own. But this is a good place to come in and take a look at the different things you could look at, right? These different workbooks. And we can go to each one. And by the way, the reason it keeps exiting me out is because I'm going through it through this breadcrumb. So when I close stuff, it'll come out, and I'll show you a different way to get in. So I can go for a few different subscriptions as well and see where other, I've just got it filtered on one subscription right now. So the alerts are only for that subscription. Kind of get a quick dashboard. All right, so that's Defender for IoT. The next thing I want to go into is, we talked real quickly about your on-prem stuff, having sensors built on-prem, right? Now you can also have your IoT security hubs or your IoT hubs, and this is where you've got data coming into your IoT. So if you look at these different pieces, now this is an IoT hub. So this is where I've got stuff coming in, making some noise. You can see where my messages are. Now, I just spun this one up today just so we could onboard it into Defender for IoT. So if we come, we've got all these different pieces that we're looking at here. And if you come down to here, you're going to see Defender for IoT as a pane within my IoT hub. So again, this is if you're using Azure IoT Hub and you're bringing your devices in here. And you've got your devices configured through Azure. This is a really easy onboarding. So if we come to overview, we're going to see that I don't have it enabled, right? So it's going to tell me what my prices are. It's going to give me an idea. If I want to come watch the videos, I can come watch the videos. But if I want to turn it on, I want to click on this button. And you can see it just onboarded. It just turned Defender for IoT on for my IoT hub. So we'll go ahead and close this. We'll come back to it, and you'll see that it's going to give me a bunch of new tasks. So now it's starting to already do my investigation of what's going on. So I've got one device in there. I only put one device in there, so it's given me, that piece that I can come right into, and I can also start sending all this stuff in. So if I come look at my security alerts, Won't have any because I just turned this on today. So we're going to go to one that's already existing now. And just to kind of show you a different way to get in here, right? So if I come to IoT up in the search results and I go to IoT, you're going to see IoT Hub. That is where I am. So if I come back to this as a total, we're going to the Cybersecurity Hub. So now let's look at this one because it's got a little bit more in there. We can have a little bit more fun with it because there's actually some data in this one. So now you can see I've got device recommendations. I got 25 unhealthy devices. By severity, I've got 4 that are high severity, and you can see what most of them are. So this is telling me that I've got an OS baseline validation failure. So that means I probably should update the OS on it. And we can come in here and take a peek at it. It's going to show me the devices that I should take some action on, right? And I can see all my different devices. I look at the description and I can review the manual remediation step here. So these are all the different devices that are giving me a fit on the set. So you can see I'm failing 17 important rules that I've created on this device. And I can also go into my log analytics workspace. So the previous presenter was talking to you about log analytics workspaces, things that you can take a peek at, kind of the whole, most of our security solutions, all the activity that happens in Azure, Sentinel, everything's based in a log analytics workspace and creates a table. So if you want to do query level investigation of any of this stuff, you can go into the log analytics workspace and hit it with a KQL query and get all that information. So again, this is one of those things where it makes life a little bit easier from that perspective. So let's look at some of the security alerts. And you can now get an idea of the security alerts of what's happening in these individual pieces, right? So this is where we saw some of these already. So let's take a look at a different one. Take a look at this one. All right, so we can see we got 3 sensor or 3 alert IDs on this one sensor. So we can kind of see where it's the Meyer tactic that's being used, and you can get in here and kind of take a little bit again. If you want to get a little bit more deep into it, go right into and do a KQL query that would give you into the access into that. Now, the last thing I want to do, and I know we were a little over time for our wheel here pretty soon to get the questions, and I know the last, but that's why I'm moving so fast. So we'll get into these conversations quickly. So these are just your alerts. Now, I want to talk a little bit about integration. So again, I kind of talked about the notion of integrating this with your on-prem Defender for endpoint, right? So I can integrate this within the Defender for endpoint with Defender for IoT. So that means you could see some of these alerts and all these different pieces in your Defender for endpoint and Microsoft Defender dashboards. So you've got that natural integration. You've also got a great integration when it comes to using Azure Sentinel, right? So if I come to Azure Sentinel, and I don't know if you are all aware of Azure Sentinel and the cloud native theme that is Azure Sentinel that we've been pushing and running for a couple of years now. It's a full function theme, and like any theme, the first thing you got to do is go connect data into it. So if we go into here, we go down to data connectors, right? I'm going to go in here and I'm just going to go ahead and search it and filter it. It's already connected, but what you've got is the Microsoft Defender for IoT connection. So if I hit the open connector page, you're going to see that it's click button config. I've got to have certain permissions, and then I get to go use which ones I want, right? So I can see that this one isn't connected. I could go ahead or this one is connected, the rest of them aren't. I could come into any one of these and I could connect it. And once they're connected, I could also automatically create incidents from the alerts created in the Defender for IoT suite. So I'd hit that connection button, and now this information is flowing right into Azure Sentinel. So it becomes part of my overall day-to-day scene investigational aspects. I can create additional alerts. So if I create analytics on it, so I'm going to have these rule templates. Now, the active rules are templates that I've created to be able to use it, right? So this is where I can come in and get my Defender pieces and one more key in there. So you can see I've got this right here. This rule, which is in use, is going to pull these information, bring this information in and raise it as an alert with high severity in Azure Sentinel. So and create an incident. So what does that mean? Well, if I come to my incidents in Azure Sentinel, these are naturally going to come in. So if I type here, let's see, we should have a couple alerts in here now. So let's see what we find. So in Sentinel, you can see now that I've got a critical IoT incident. You can see the tactics that are being used, the entities that are being part of it. And if I want to go into the full details, I can come into here. All right, so now we can it's still loading some of the aspects about it, but it's going to show me all about it. It's taking so long, but you can see my tactics. Well, let's go ahead and investigate using the Sentinel graphical UI. So now I can see the alerts. I can see my related entities. I can go look at additional topology pieces around this, and I can walk through these different pieces and see what's going on and get a better idea. So if I look at the timeline for this critical IoT incident, and I come to the timeline, we can get a little bit more information about it. And we can even have playbooks that will automatically respond to this incident. And I can also review the entities. Now, why is that important? Why are the entities important? Because if we come to Sentinel, we have a piece called User Entity Behavior Analytics, or Entity Behavior right here. This is where its baseline is learning what's going on. So we talked about machine learning. We talked about the way to develop anomaly detection based on traditional usage. This is going to feed that machine to allow it to become a little bit more effective. The last thing I want to cover, because like I said, I know we're running low on time, and I want to make sure we've got enough time to answer a few questions. Within here, we have workbooks. So I showed you some workbooks already, but we also have the Sentinel workbooks. Again, if I go IoT, we're going to see that we've got asset discovery and we've got Defender for IoT alerts. And I can come in and view my saved workbook. I'm not sure why it's there. We go. So now I can start looking at these different pieces and get a better idea of my alert severity distribution. You know, some are medium, some are high, but then I've got all these different pieces that I can kind of crank in and take a peek at it. So you'll see this information is proliferated through the Azure ecosystem. And again, if you really wanted to get into it, you could go straight into a KQL query and get it, but you can kind of see your most common alerts here, your top 10 of exactly what's going on. And it just gives you a little bit more of an overall understanding of what's going on in your ecosystem. Okay, so now I'm jumping over to jump right in here.
We are almost out of time, so we just want to leave a few more minutes for Q&A.
Yep. So that's what I'm in the chat window now, looking at different questions. So I don't know if anybody.
The Defender for IoT, I believe, is included in A5 security license. Is that correct?
So Defender for IoT is outside of the normal Defender licensing. It's an Azure-based piece, right? Now there are some licenses that are included for the integration into the Defender for Endpoint, for bringing down a sensor and that kind of stuff on-prem. There are just different pieces for each kind of chunk, depending on how you're doing it, right?
All right. So if you want to move into Mr. Danny Gorma's question, because we have a few of them. So.
All right. So these are great questions, Dan. Now,
if you want to respond to them via email, that's
yeah,
fine.
email's fine on those too.
Yeah. I think that one's. I was going to say there's a. Back from my CSA days, I'm going to give you the great CSA answer. It depends. So I think it'd be good to investigate your questions a little bit more. And kind of get a little bit little more in depth with kind of where you'd be applying it and how you'd be doing these different things. So yeah, I think an email is going to be the best one with that one, because there's a lot of different pieces there that we could get into. So,
if you want to share your email address, so
sure, I'll put that in the chat window right now.
Is there some quick question that you can answer here? Otherwise, you can, we can respond to them via email.
Is it okay if I interject a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
So the thing that I was researching online during your presentation was it's message-based or device-based. And I just wanted the group to know that there's pricing based on how you do the IoT discovery and how you do that.
Exactly. And that was kind of that question of, included in the A3 license. That's where you start. You can get out of it real quickly based on how you want to license the devices and how you work through these different things. And again, what you're referring to a lot of times, or you use an IoT hub, you use an EIoT device, you're using an OT device, and so all of it, it's licensing questions are usually less clear than the technology questions, right? The technology is generally an easy thing to implement. A lot of times, just understanding the nuances of the licensing landscape is pretty much tough. There was a question on identity, Defender for Identity. As far as adjacency, really where you'd see that intersection of these pieces is in Azure Sentinel, because the Defender for Identity telemetry is going to come in, and those alerts are going to come into Sentinel, and so you'll naturally have that integration. And I think that's a really important topic to understand is. When you think about identity and the glue that it becomes to hold everything together, it's just super important from that perspective to understand the correlation of different events, especially when you're talking about user and behavior analytics. That's where you could say, Defender for Identity, is going to provide you additional richness from a behavioral anomaly detection to say, why is this user all of a sudden trying to hit these IoT devices, and what are these IoT devices? That's where you can kind of get that piece. And I appreciate your sarcasm there, Dan. I'm laughing as hard as you are at that point. So.
I think we had one more. There was it says, can we limit BYOD to specific VLANs?
That would be, I think, an institutional question. Whether Defender for IoT can, lock your VLANs down and provision on specific VLANs, those absolute devices. That one's going to be, some institutional requirements. But yeah, I mean, essentially, that's where Defender for IoT can help you hand in hand and do a lot of that device discovery and find out when things end up on the wrong VLANs.
All right, I think we're almost there for lunch. So if anybody has any questions, they can reach out to Mr. Clayton at this email address he posted in the chat. If not, you can send us a message soon and we will respond. So let's take a lunch till what time we're coming back, Cindy? You have the agenda. Well, was it 12:45? You can hear us, Cindy?
Yeah,
12:40.
sorry, 12:45.
So hang tight, folks. We'll be back soon at 12:45. So Daniel Gorman from security is going to talk about security awareness from Coast College. And if can you hear us?
Yeah, no, it's you couldn't hear me. I was muted.
Oh.
The first slide was excellent, but I get a retake, so that's
yeah. Is that all right?
okay.
Right, sounds good. You're good to go.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Hello and welcome. I just wanted to do a presentation on how COAST does our security awareness program. I say this is not our norm, nor is it how we do it for every department, but occasionally people do reach out to us and ask us to do specialized presentations. I wanted to share my crazy and ask you to embrace the craziness in your own approaches also. And that also means come back and share it with everyone here too. So this is the Who Am I page. It's basically things I've done, where I've worked. I like to also make special mention to my local community college tour. I went to Orange Coast, Rancho Santiago, Santa Ana, Fullerton, and UCI. In terms of jobs, I've mostly done Coast for my professional career. Before that, I did some consulting, computer repair, and I worked for an MSSP. Oops, in 2 slides. Purpose. My main goal of this presentation is to make you think about your organization and business cases. How do you go about training when asked? For those of you not been asked yet, assume you will get asked at some point during your career. User training is an evolving and growing part of our security and IT roles. Have you critically thought about what contributes most to your budgets, financially, reputationally? So I have this in 4 main parts. The first one is just the thought exercise. Does blanket training align with your overall organizational benefits? You know, if you're just doing the same, case on IT training every time to every department, are you potentially missing out on some areas that make each department unique? So the second part is working with those departments. What works for me but you should find out what works for you. The third is an example of what we did with our International Engagement Center. And the fourth is what larger discussion can be had? Where do we go from here? So obligatory section title, overall practices aligned with benefits, going into section 1. Let's be honest, we are all people, and one less button clicked because it's in front of us for someone could mean a huge time savings to ourselves or other coworkers. However, security training, why are we doing it? Is it the willingness to better us and others? Is it to reduce our overall work through users being security aware? Are we just doing it because any reason here? Is your security program one-sided and one gold? Depending on your goal and reasoning, the amount of effort or staff time can be put into specialized training will vary. Some departments may not need any. Some might need, the majority of the presentation time. So I will ask, what do you show today? Is it enough? Should you or could you augment it? Some areas I want you to think about are areas with varied risk. These areas can be foundations, departments, anyone interacting with money or forms that can result in money being moved. I'm very wordy, so I'm going a little slower for the captioning. Specialized positions unique to your organization. For us at Coast, we have a school of seamanship that ironically will get small boats time to time. Most will be donated to the school, and then the school then sells them somewhere else for operating budget. Most fishing tests do not have an option, boat-centric fishing. If your school does have a solution that has boat-centric fishing, I'd be very curious. However, that department is one of the most spearfished, mal-spammed people in our district. So how do we go about working with our departments? So YMMV means your mileage may vary, meaning I am going to say things and I can't say will always work for you personally in your environment or in your organization. So consider them more talking points. For those that do in-person training, we often come in and tell our users some information. They are basically a captive audience. Some listening right now might feel a very slight parallel right now to this practice. I'm sure you all elected to be here at this moment listening to me, but I'm sure you will have points you want to inject, share, or create further discussion on during this presentation. However, in this type of presentation, that is more delegated to the Q&A section at the end. The reprieve from hearing my voice to voice your own, for some, cannot come soon enough. Things you feel and specific points are omitted because the presenter, myself, is not privy or had any kind of mutual back and forth with you on the topics I am presenting. Is this how you treat your departments, your users, your approach to training? Do we have a need to create a prior dialogue for security presentations? Personally, I like to treat mine like a project. I feel if I have some information and make it more geared toward that audience, I feel more will be interested and in turn create interest in the information presented. Usually I'll start by calling the department or them calling me, as the case may be in most cases. Find talking points unique to them, find what attacks are unique, find the medium which these attacks often come in, whether it's phone or email. Educate myself, usually about an hour of personal research on the talking points they have told me or actions that they presented. And what I mean by this is that us IT security people, we see things as specific terms. That's not always how our users dictate it to us. So sometimes until I have an understanding of what they're trying to communicate, I need to first understand where that attack would be coming from and what the purpose is. It may not fit within the normal wheelhouse of things I normally look at. So in my quick rundown, number 3 is more optional, and I often do it in parallel with number 4. Mainly, I use the presenter notes kind of to put my thoughts in and then ask them for feedback and correction. So I can't be an expert in something I don't know. So I want to ask the experts if I'm interpreting it correctly, if they had to explain it. So I create the skeleton presentation on topics and to reiterate your understanding of the talking points with those experts. Draft in this case means fast. I don't button it up. I just put in a lot of what I'm going to speak about. More like a bullet list, maybe on the first approach. We ask our partners in this, the people that manage the group you'll be presenting to validate the unique information. I don't give them my whole slide set at this time. I just say, on your specialized information, please validate that I'm correct. So when I hit number 5, it's basically we choose and add in our standard training and concatenate to be a specialized presentation. This is kind of where you make it pretty show ready. We also review and try to remove confusion from terms or processes. Lastly, for the slides at least, we ask our partners to review one last time, this time with the standard training involved. And this is, again, more for their understanding of the material I'm going to talk about, to see if I'm shooting over their heads and they're my experts, then I need to make sure it's right for the audience. Presentation is a key step you can't avoid when doing a presentation. Number 7, you present. Good luck, you got this. So lastly, make sure you get any lessons learned. I can't reiterate, number 8 is very important. You want to immediately after you get the feedback and review, at least add it to like your title slide. So next time you go back to this set of information, you at least kind of have the feedback and notes so you can update it on the next approach. Depending on the audience and if it's dynamic versus static information, consider recording it. If you can record it and let them play it back on their schedules, then you don't have to, as a person, spend the research, spend the time to present it again. You can let them manage that for their users. So the additional questions to consider. Key terms and summary is sometimes really beneficial, which I'm going to go to my example on International Engagement Center, because they're not native speakers. So we want to give them as much chance to learn terms and see words ahead of time. Lastly, and I'll turn it on just briefly, PowerPoint now has an ability to do subtitles. We have an excellent captioner, so I'm not going to keep this on by any means, but I just want to show you what it looks like. So when I enable it, PowerPoint will automatically try to translate whatever I'm saying. So this is useful sometimes when you're in classes where they don't know English as a language, or if they're just more of a better learner from reading than visually. I said visually, but visually or audible. So what COAST did with the International Engagement Center, it brings us to my example. So our standard deck is going to go in part 4. So I'm not going to go over the layout just yet, but I did want to go over the way we build the standard deck for a presentation. So we have what we call our essential information. I like to call it the Craig Oberlin slide deck. He formulated a really awesome base slide deck that I still utilize to this day. I choose what slides to add, what slides to remove, and I choose if I need to add additional slide or update slides every time I review it. So your standard deck is going to be your things like phishing email, what is malware, what is ransomware, how do targets move, what do a cyber attack look like, things of that general nature. Our typical slide deck would be 30 minutes of standard information to start. From there, we can prune it down to 20, add in 10 minutes of specialized information, or we can enlarge it to 45 minutes. Usually when we enlarge it, we include more, I want to call it niche things, like we'll talk about hardware safety when charging at an airport, a thing called a data POW, which basically prevents data channels when charging. So you can safely use public chargers without fear of them sending a virus, things of that more niche. So what did I learn? I learned that I use a lot of colloquialisms. I like to say, hit it out of the park and other things that people don't grow up with in, we'll call it, other countries. So one of my major takeaways is that when I do presentations, especially for international students, I need to make sure that I'm not using colloquialisms, or if I am, I at least have some kind of translation chart, how to speak Danny, because not everyone can speak Danny. So when brought into a department and shown specific attacks and phishing, they get many I was not aware of. So what I mean by this is the subject at which they are targeting our users was kind of foreign to me. I didn't understand the main targets in main ways they were targeting our foreign exchange students. Mostly it falls on stealing student funds, usually by pressure, which we'll go into in the quick view of the presentation. It's just something that I never really thought about. You know, it's like if the people calling you about your car's warranty threatened to take your car if you didn't renew it. Very high pressure, high tactics, makes the user feel like they have no control. So what does our presentations look like? So our presentations start with our standard deck. So our standard deck usually has our title page. We'll usually have school information, school colors. You know, I'll tell everyone, you know, thank you for joining us, and all the things you heard at the beginning on my slide 1. We'll go into the normal slide deck, which will include, now we're at the point of where I was telling you the boilerplate stuff that we teach all cybersecurity slide decks. The only difference is for the International Center, Engagement Center, I would highlight key terms like mitigate would be orange, bolded, and kind of down there. I would normally speak what mitigate meant, but with people that have not heard that term as much, I try to make sure that there's cues on every slide of any word they might not have seen. And these words I also gave them ahead of time so they had a quick reference, alphabetical order of what these words were. So we go into cybersecurity focuses. We go into why you need to do cybersecurity. The main thing is value, more vulnerabilities, code is more complex. As things get more complex, there's more vulnerabilities. People who are hackers is not just a kid sitting in their bedroom anymore. It's big business. We go into definitions of what credential harvesting is and credential stuffing. The point of my presentation today is not to go over cybersecurity. If you want that next time, tell me and I can definitely do a cybersecurity general training one. So email threats, different types of email threats, follow the money. One thing we often talk about is EDU abuse. In 2021, a Coast account was worth about $5. It got you Gmail and Office if it was a prior student that had paid in for a class. So every account you have that is not being pruned, that is not by an active user, has a value. People are going to try to get that value off you. You're going to see attacks. Web attacks, mainly lookalike links is key in that one. Ransomware, we talk about different ransomwares, and some of you in here have had ransomware, so I'm not going to name any schools because I think that'd be mean, but we're all vulnerable to ransomware. So just things out there. So that's the boilerplate stuff. We throw it behind us. Now we're going to go into the specialized stuff. So the question is, what is targeted for international students? Well, I didn't realize that the majority of times it was urgency, scare, and benefit. Basically, they wanted to scare the student, make them have to do it now, and the benefit, if they were targeting the benefit side, was something that was, you know, buyer beware, too cheap to believe, you know, try to get them enticed in it. I'll go into examples next if you're curious. So the second part I had with my International Engagement Center was, do they have or have they adopted a standard model for the students to learn and use? They said no. And I said, do you care if we adopt the Rice University model? I suggested this because in my personal research, this seemed to be like one a lot of other schools adopted. And I was like, this is a good model. Scam is easy to remember. Stop, collect, caller info, alert authority, make report. So the main thing on that is to create that feedback loop. So the students then get trained to tell the International Engagement Center to notify them of these things, so they in turn can then notify more students, kind of creating that feedback loop so that we can all learn better together of what's happening locally. So I make a note up there, voice calls fraudulently claiming to be certain US agencies. That's usually on the scare and urgency stuff. Targeted ads, apparently you can be flagged for targeted ads based on Google searches. So there's fake promoted links that are there just to harvest international students. So you always want to make sure standard rules apply, make sure links look legit, make sure the website's legit. Mail will always be certified mail. Apparently, once they know where you're at, they'll send fake letters to international students trying to get them to wire transfer, send money. And the big one is student housing fraud. Student housing fraud was nothing I've ever done in any prior cybersecurity conversation, because most people that live here aren't looking for housing. The majority of my students, being non-international, have no reason to look for housing. And what they'll typically do in this is people will rent like Airbnbs, get the student to go quote unquote check out the house, get the student to sign over, Western Union, their first month's rent, come back the next day and find out it's locked, or whatever key they gave or whatever is not real. They literally just got scammed out of a chunk of money and have no place potentially to live. Very scary if you're a student. So in the presentation, which follows a lot of presentations, don't let the attacker gain control. Make sure that you stay within control. You control the conversation. You can call them back. You don't have to give away information if you don't trust them, things of that nature. But have you ever said, don't give away your I-20 information in a presentation? That's not a normal thing I would typically do in any kind of cybersecurity training. So this is the last slide of the specialized information, just things not to give away, updated for the demographic. Which brings us to my last section, going forward. I ask you all to consider, have you reached out to any specific departments? Have any reached out to you? When is the last time you said, please do not give away your I-20 information, or boat-centric phishing? How can you best present this information? Can you record it and allow it to be used from years to come? And I know I'm kind of just reiterating that slide. I feel bad just reading it, but I want you guys to feel that. I want you to know that there's potentially things outside, the outliers of your current training program. Going forward, do you have students, staff, or schools of training that causes significant benefit reputationally or financially? How do you protect it? And that's really the question that I had on that. And then the last part of this, because my question slides, was I wanted to finish early and fast so that I could have the dialogue with all of you. I can make seemingly, if it's within my wheelhouse, any presentation during one of these workshops that you guys want to hear. And I have no problem people suggesting a topic for me, and I will try to research and come up with a presentation. But I just wanted to know that for this group, is there specialized conversations that you feel are not happening that we could be more cognizant of and kind of gear it more towards you, create a prior dialogue, and then present it on the date. And with that, that is my quick run through of this. And as I said, I left the bulk of it for conversation.
If anybody has a question, please post it in the chat. We'll wait for a minute or so.
And if not, if people want to see any of those prior slides, I can definitely explain any of the prior slides of our standard deck, or
somebody has a question. If you want to check.
Let me see if I can get back to Zoom conversations here. Oh yeah. As hopefully I'm pronouncing this right. Sadi. Yes, Aaron information, not Aaron information. Iona. It's not Iona either. What is it? It's caller ID, but caller ID can be fake, especially with VoIP-based routing. You can also use VoIP-based routing to strip caller ID blocking. So as we're now in a VoIP-based world where telephones go over the internet, we have way more options of spoofing. We have way more options of preventing protections. So just keep that in mind. Sylvia, for the most part about online courses, in our standard deck, we do talk about how you should have limited password reuse, MFA on all your important things. If you do password reuse, the first ones to change always be bank and other things that can reset password. So typically your primary email. I would always encourage them to offer this resource. as a coast, we're kind of in a unique position because we have a specialized security department that a lot of schools don't have. We've always been open to departmental training. Typically, we mainly do it on flex days. And flex days are usually 2 to 3 times a year where the colleges ask us to present. Separate of that 2 to 3 times a year, it's usually only if a department specifically asks for it. Any idea how to stop college departments from sending spam-like emails to students, especially email that does not include their department phone number or web page? So is the issue that it's being blocked, or is the issue that it's just in a format that the students are seemingly believing it's spam? Or is it just too much in bulk? If the question is emails are getting blocked as spam, I urge you to look at a thing called a feedback loop. Yahoo has one, Gmail has one. If you enroll your college in what's called a feedback loop, they'll actually send emails being flagged as spam to that feedback loop email. And it actually they usually will raise your threshold of how many messages you can send before you get marked as spam in those systems. Help wanted ads that followed help wanted spam. Oh, so they are just putting topics that kind of fall within the training, if you will, of your departments to send as a topic that's not mimicking those of more malicious emails. I have not, I mean, I've seen the fake mail responses. So for Jericho, yeah, I've seen them. I have not responded to any of them. Yeah, I would say if your users, so one thing you can do, and this is as an IT person, if your mail system allows you to alter the subject of an email and it came from internally, you can try to edit the header so you can write internal or from the college or something in the header line, but then the attackers can always copy that too. And that's the problem with the cat and mouse game, is that as you adjust, they might try to mimic you better. Again, hopefully I'm saying the name right, Sadi, recent emails are blocked if MX records missing. Make sure MX records exist. Excellent point. The second part of that is sender protection framework called SPF, and that's a DNS text record that says who can send as your college. We should all by this point have SPF records. There's also other specialized records that can do what's called pinning or label certain organizations to do certain actions. The Tech Center, for example, has a CAA record in their DNS, very rare to see by a lot of us, but that just says, if you're getting a certificate from them, you can only get it from this host. So there's definitely lots of specialized things in DNS we can do to try to limit who can send as us and then get reported if they're not us. Is there any other question today on email-based, we'll call it actions? Or I mean, I can't say what's going to be best for any one specific organization because we're all unique in that aspect, but there's always, things we can do better or try to align with if it helps. But, there's no guarantee your org will adopt it. One of the ones we fight, which will be a question in the future, is sending through Microsoft 365 for certain third-party based applications. As soon as Microsoft goes full modern authentication, you won't be able to do non-MFA connections, and most of those services are going to break. So we have publication departments that use, these third-party utilities, and part of it's going to be in email. How do we move forward, and do we want the school to effectively be on a third party, kind of like MailChimp or Constant Contact? One of my biggest nightmares in managing email is still SendGrid. SendGrid has way too many clients. They have way too many includes in their SPF records we talked about. And they're almost always flagged. And every time I have an email issue, because we let SendGrid send as Coast, we often will get that, oh, well, we checked your SPF records and you have too many. And it's like, well, we have too many because of SendGrid. If you take SendGrid off the list, we're fine. Oh, 100%. MFA, guys, as soon as you can. Coast has been doing MFA now for about 4 years. Probably going on 5 years this October. So we 100% want everyone to do MFA. I can't even tell you. I was talking to another department. The last thing I was going to mention, the QR code is for community colleges. It's a Slack that I run. It's for any specific California community college. Everyone's welcome to join if you want to join. Tell me if you need any channel on any subjects. Typically, if a school asks a question and there's nobody that responds, I usually ask the co-staff if they have an answer for these other schools. I got like 50 people in there already. If you have any questions for our community, though, excellent place to ask. But that is my personal pet project. Do you have, so this is from Dan, and Dan is actually, he's hitting the nail on the head. So a lot of cyber insurance going forward require annual training. So training on request is specialized training. Training non-mandatory is flex day. DKIM is also wonderful, by the way, Dan. DKIM is signing up messages in email to make sure they are irreputably from your mail system, meaning that they're guaranteed to be from. So the last part on training is we are going to have to implement mandatory annual training. We're working on that right now. Yeah, and you know, when we enforced MFA for students and staff domains, we saw a significant drop in external attacks. When you're not worth as much, remember the value of the accounts have a cost, have a monetary value. When you make it harder for them to get to those accounts, they're going to go to schools without MFA. So when Coast turn on MFA, those people that are attacking us are now attacking some of you. So keep that in mind, that until we all get to MFA, whoever's not is going to just get the lion's share of the attacks. We do and we don't on geofencing. So geofencing, we're doing in large swaths, typically because it's whack-a-mole. I used to block whole ASNs, but when I blocked whole ASNs, we would eventually get users in those regions. For example, I recently had to unblock a specific telecom in Vietnam because we were getting locked accounts because of brute forcing. But because IPs are portable, because IPs will change, and because we have international students, it's really hard to geofence applications for us. Typically, we have to do it behavior-based if we can. Okay, so Carl has a great question too. So how are some of you enforcing MFA on students with exceptions due to non-access to smart devices? They have to have MFA. The short answer is they have two options when no smartphone. As what Sadie said, email is number one. And typically they'd have to go to a library in that case. So we'd usually see public centers for those users. And then number two, YubiKey or physical hardware token. So we've don't shell out the cost of which, but we recommend to them that they spend the $40 or so and get a YubiKey, and we can enroll it. But yeah, even Okta does not, because we're one of the Okta schools, does not allow the students to enroll personal emails. They do this so that the email required to access the account is through enterprise level, whatever you have, be it spam filter, antivirus, etc. So Okta by default, you can't just put in your Gmail. So we actually have to do students manually through API, and we only do it if they can prove they don't have a smartphone. But initial enrollment, we actually siphon the CC apply data, and we actually enroll them with their CC apply data by default. There's no point right now in the provisioning process the students do not have MFA. Yeah, as one of the Slack said, I'm sure that QR code's a fish. It isn't a fish. It's just the Slack. Come on, guys. But as I said, I'm all for cross communication. I'm all for whatever topics. I know the tech center's always fine with me jumping in and doing a presentation. If you have a presentation you want and you think I'm the right vehicle for it, send it my way. I'll definitely consider it. And if you even want to go 50s on it or do more speaking engagements for practice, right now with COVID, it's not fearful. I don't have my camera on. I can turn my camera on. I'm actually dressed as if I was going to be on camera because I think it's best so that you feel you're doing a professional presentation. But I'm always, encouraging people to do more talks. And I think some of you saw my earlier CISO one, which was a little bit rough, but they get better. Thank you, Mike. And by the way, I'm totally going to that Edu Day with Microsoft.
So we're good with time, Cindy?
I think I'm a little bit over, but.
Yes, okay. All right, so I think the rest of the questions, somebody, if they want really burning questions, they can always send Mr. Danny, and I assure you he will answer it because he's very diligent from what I know. So,
yeah.
All right, so send it your email. Thank you for posting it. So when is the next talk, Cindy, if you want to, what's the schedule?
We're supposed to start at 1:35.
Okay, so I guess, Danny, if you want to talk for a few more minutes,
Yeah.
we can take a break at 1:25.
I mean, I'll answer any questions. So the next question I got was to enforce geofencing. The thing to keep in mind that's going to defeat you on that a little bit is antivirus solutions. McAfee bought TunnelBear in I think it was 2020. As of last month, they switched to DigitalOcean, which is a huge ASN CDN. So we're getting all sorts of DigitalOcean IPs now from any person that's currently paying for McAfee. So keep that in mind, that even when you're geofencing, people are going to use VPN, and more antivirus solutions are enabling VPN as a perk. So it may change semi-regularly. And I see that with international students too. Our international students will sometimes hop on VPNs for different reasons. And you'll see some just switch countries all of a sudden. Impossible travel is usually the alert. And you just have to keep in mind that you want to know if your threshold is, blocked permanently until you okay it, or, let it decay out, 15-minute ban, or not ban it at all. We had the same problem with IP intelligence in Okta. People are being flagged as malicious IP addresses for fraud, but it's really just that IP address some point in the past would have had fraud and doesn't anymore, but there's no one in that system to really clear that out. So you're still are going to create yourself a lot of work to massage that data. So I'm not saying I'm not against it. I'm just saying be prepared to do that work. I'll never say don't do more investigation into making sure data is correct to people that are spending money in your institution. Question the user. Honestly, if I usually say that we tell our help desk, tell them to call in. When they call in, make sure they're registered for a class, paid for a class. And if they're already at the paid part, I said, tell me their information and I'll see if I can contact them or have the call transferred to me. I'll validate of why they're possibly traveling in, make sure it's a VPN or something else that's reasonable, and then I'll whitelist them. I mean, they're still gonna have MFA and stuff. They're just gonna be whitelisted from impossible travel alerts. But usually our threshold at Coast is paid and registered. And Larry has a wonderful note about DKIM and DMARC. And for those that don't know the acronym DMARC, it basically says, I'm going to send reports and validate how real I think these people are. So it uses DKIM to sign it to make sure that it's real from your specific domain, so that when these reports go out, the reports have legitimacy behind them. We have seen misconfigurations in DMARC that do flag. One comes to mind is the city of Santa Ana. When it developed, turned on its DKIM and DMARC, it flagged itself as malicious. So we stopped receiving emails from them because they were telling us not to. So those are things that you want to roll out slowly and test. But it definitely helps secure a correct data path that email is legitimate. And honestly, at Coast right now, we don't do as much DKIM validation, we've actually scaled it back a lot because a lot of businesses seem really bad at configuring it. If you guys ever want me to do a presentation on what we do for our mail system, we're largely Proofpoint, but we love their automation. Speaking is a person who's been using it for like 4 years now. Really love it. So Jeff, that's a good question. So it depends on where the information comes from. If an account is compromised, because we have MFA, we're typically less gung-ho on disabling the account and more so seeing what alternate means we can contact the user to tell them. You got it, Cindy. Thank you. So typically, one of the ISACs we are registered with, which we have since stopped paying, would actually give us the dumps and we could validate if it was compromised. And really our fear is more so if it's account reuse and if they have it on things not the district. It's more like a benefit we give them because we don't see a threat for us, but we think it's a benefit for them to change it. Yeah, I'll look into DNS security. We actually have it with our Palo Alto also. And I'll give my PSA on Palo Alto, so I always say this anytime someone brings up Palo Alto. Palo Altos can be enumerated, so make sure Palo Alto is always patched. If you're not patched or you're running an EOL, EOS version of Palo Alto, that's end of life, end of service, you are vulnerable most likely, so be careful. They can figure out what version of firmware you're running from the internet publicly. But I like Palo Altos for the most part. And that's not, a lot of firewalls have that same issue. I'm just putting it out there that a lot of people believe that, oh, it's EOL, it's fine. It's not fine. I think that's my time, but we'll talk to you guys, I'm sure, another day. Oh, and there's one hand up, but I'm not sure if it's still relevant from Roseanne.
They can email it.
Okay.
We're supposed to receive via chat.
Then
All
I'm
right,
going to be done.
Yeah, thank you very much, Danny, for this presentation. So if anybody has a question, please feel free to email him. And we'll be back at 1:35 with Mr. Tran.